Okay, hi everyone. So today we are going to discuss about the multi-site indexer clustering. If you have seen my previous videos, we discussed about single site indexer clustering, the clustering overview, and in fact we implemented the clustering as well. So now in the same series, today we are going to see the concept of multi-site indexer clustering in Splunk, how it's useful, and like where in what cases actually you should implement multi-site indexer clustering. So I have put in few slides to give you the reference and as a quick guide to refer whenever you need any info regarding multi-site indexer clustering. So moving to the next slide. So what is multi-site indexer clustering? So multi-site indexer clustering in Splunk, it helps keep your data safe and always available. So what does it mean? Like now in multi-site indexer clustering, we are going to keep the copies of your data across multiple sites. And what site refers here? So site is nothing, it's just the physical location. So you're going to keep the copy of your data across different locations. So and how it helps? So I mean it's the better way of disaster recovery basically. So even if you lose the site completely, if you lose, if due to natural calamities or any other reason the data center goes down completely, you're still not going to lose your data rights because you have expanded across multiple locations, multiple sites. So that's where the multi-site clustering comes in picture, to provide you the improved disaster recovery, and obviously then it helps in the smooth business operations. So uh, yeah, exactly. So now moving to the next slide. So here we are discussing about the use cases. So as I mentioned earlier, I mean, there are two key benefits of using multi-site indexer clustering over single-site cluster. If you remember, in single-site clustering, we have the peer nodes, but those peer nodes were deployed on the same site, same location. So that's not the uh, proper way of ensuring that you have implemented your system for the disaster recovery. But now here it in multi-site indexer clustering, it provides you the improved disaster recovery. So like um, uh, because you're going to span your data across multiple locations, so that always keeps your data safe, even in not all the sites, at least uh, on the few sites or on the secondary site. So a typical multi-site cluster has search heads on each site. So that's the important point, just to note. So basically what I'm trying to explain here. So suppose you have the site 1 here and site 2 here. So you have your peer nodes, few peer nodes, suppose 2 peer nodes deployed here and 2 peer nodes deployed to site 2. So, I mean, what's the recommended way of deploying the search heads? You should have one search head here, even if you're having the standalone. But obviously, in the clustered indexer environment, I'm sure you're not going to use the standalone as such. So you're going to use the search head cluster, obviously. So the better way of doing it, you should have one search head clustered deployed here on the site 1, and this in a similar way you should have it deployed on the site 2. And why, like how it helps actually, so that's the second point here. That's the search affinity. So what happens, like your sites are going to span across different locations. So maybe this is somewhere in US, this is somewhere in Australia, right? So and your data is being replicated across multiple locations, but you might have users to search the data from Australia, from US, from different locations. So search affinity, what it does, it redirects the user to the closest location basically. So if the user is trying to retrieve the data, so like if this site is in US, right, and if the user is trying to retrieve the data from US, then this search head clustering will redirect the request to this site. If this site is not available at all, if it's completely gone, then obviously the requests will be redirected to site 2. So we will see how we can configure search affinity. This is basically to redirect the users to the closest location, closest data center. If you do not define search affinity, then obviously the request can traverse to either of the available sites. And you can have multiple sites. You can have site 1, site 2, a number of sites. Okay, so now moving to the next slide. Here again, so if you see the components of multi-site indexer clustering, it's very similar to what we have seen in the single site indexer clustering. You have three kind of nodes here, manager node, peer nodes, and then the search head. So, and if you can recall about the cluster master, so it plays this similar role in multi-site indexer clustering as well. It manages the cluster and performs the replication across different peers. But one thing to highlight here is that each cluster has same cluster master. So what it means, like even if you have multiple sites, right? If you have site 1, you have site 2, you are going to have same cluster master. So same master node will manage both your sites. It's not like you are going to have different master nodes across your sites. So it's same master node which is going to manage your cluster completely. That's the important point when working on the multi-site indexer clustering. The second very important point on this slide is about master node again. So the manager node, like now they are referring it as a master node. So the manager node controls the entire cluster. It might reside on a specific site, right? So as I explained, you might have site 1, site 2. It might still be deployed on either of these sites, but it's going to play the role for all the available sites in the cluster. It's not like that it's uh, the master node is only for any specific site. So that's not the case. Okay, so like in summary, the master node is not part of any site basically. That's in simple terms. Now this is very important slide. And here if you see, we have site replication factor and then site search factor. So if you remember in single site indexer clustering, right, we have the terminologies called site replication factor and then the site factor, correct? But here if you see, we have site replication factor and site search factor. So what it means, so as we are discussing about the multi-site indexer clustering, obviously we are talking about replicating the data across multiple locations. So what site replication factor does, it stores few copies of your data to your origin site. So for example, if you have site 1 and you have site 2, and here you have some UFs which are sending data. So for example, if the UF has sent data to any of the peer in site 1, it will keep few copies here, and based on your site replication factor, what it will do, it will replicate those copies to the site 2. Again, if there is a UF which has sent few copies to site 2, any of the peer, what it will do, it will store the copy there and then it will replicate to the let me correct it. So it will store the copy here and then it will replicate to site 1. So that's what you see here, right? If you see here, we have default which is 2 and then in total 3. So what it means, on site 1, if the data is being forwarded right from the UF, then what this default replication factor will do, it will store 2 copies of the data here and one copy here. This is the default site replication factor. So in total, you are going to have 3 copies of data, right? 2 on your origin site and 1 on the other site. And this other site can be, like if you have multiple sites, site 1, site 2, site 3, site 4, then this one additional copy can reside on any of your available sites. It's not always necessary that it will be on site 2. It can be on either of the available sites. Similarly, we have the site search factor. So this defines the number of searchable copies, and the concept is very similar to single site clustering. So replication factor maintains the raw data copy while search factor maintains the searchable copies, right? So, and the default is origin 1 and total 2. So what it means, you will have one searchable copy here and one here, in total 2. That's the default site replication factor, but you can obviously define it as per your requirement. Now the important thing to note here is, if you have two site replication factor here, like origin 2 and 1, the default is, okay, so I'm discussing about this one. Let me make it more clear. So we are discussing about two sites, site 1, site 2. Okay. Okay, let me erase this one as well. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So this one, so origin 2, total 3. What it means, like on site 1 you are keeping 2 copies, and then these additional copy you are keeping on the another site. So important thing to note is, when you are defining the site replication factor, you need to make sure the site replication factor values should be less than or equal to their corresponding values in the site replication factor. So what it means, if you are defining site replication factor as 2 on the origin site, right? Here you have site 1, you have site 2, and if you are defining site replication factor as 2, then your site search factor, it should be equal to or less than this site replication factor value what you've defined. It can't be 3, right? So that's the thing you need to remember when configuring the site replication factor and site search factor. Fine. So now moving to the next slide, data availability and disaster recovery. So Splunk Multi-Site Indexer Clustering ensures data availability and disaster recovery by automatically replicating data across multiple locations. That's what I told you in previous slides as well, right? You do not really worry about transferring data from one site to another site for backup purpose or anything. The multi-site clustering will automatically take care of copying the data to across sites. So as I said, even if one site goes down completely, you will still have your data and your searches will continue to run. So that's about the data availability and disaster recovery. It provides you the assurity of that your data will always be available and your searches will not be affected. Here is a quick glimpse of like the architecture, how it looks. So here, I mean, it's just the sample diagram. So if you see, we have site, this is our site 1, if you see here, and this is our site 2, and we have two peer nodes here, and as I was explaining earlier, this is the recommended way of doing it. You should have a separate search head for your sites so that the request redirects to the closest location by default. It should not traverse from here to search the data. It will, like from the network point of view, it's going to be very costable search, right? So you would want to avoid it. You would want to avoid network latency related issues. So that's where the search affinity comes in picture. And while implementing the multi-site clustering, I'll show you that. So you have site 1 and site 2, and then obviously you have your agents which are forwarding the data. So if these UFs forwarding data to these peer nodes based on your site replication and search factor, it will store the copies here, and based on those values, it will be replicated to your another site. So in a similar way, if these UFs is sending data to these peer nodes, it will be replicated to site 2. Okay. Now coming to the implementation. So it's straightforward. It's the only major difference between implementing single site and multi-site indexer clustering is that single site indexer clustering you can implement using Splunk Web as well. That's what we have seen in single site clustering implementation when we worked on that, right? But coming to multi-site indexer clustering, you don't get that option to implement it using the Splunk Web. Either you have to modify the server.conf directly, or you can use the CLI option as a secondary one. So again, you have three kind of nodes here: manager node, peer nodes, and then the search head. So this is recommended, as I was explaining. It's recommended to have search heads per site, even if it's a standalone or the clustering environment. Okay. So as I said, Splunk Web option, it's not there when working on the multi-site clustering node. Either you need to edit server.conf or you can use CLI. So here the major thing, if you see, you need to define the site, and this is for manager node. As I said, even if you define the site for manager node, it does not mean that the manager node belongs to any specific site. The manager node is going to act for the whole cluster as if one. It's not like that the manager node will act only for the site one. So that's the important thing. And then obviously we'll define mode multi-site. Obviously multi-site you need to make it true, because now we are working on multi-site clustering. Available sites, you can define multiple sites if you have deployed your instances across multiple data centers. You can define multiple sites, and then you need to define site replication factor and site search factor. So origin, like where the data is being reported by the UF, it will keep 2 copies there, and then another copy it will replicate to another available site. In a similar way, site search factor. So as I said, this value should not be greater than what you have defined for site replication factor. It can be either equal or less than what's there in site replication factor. Pass key, you can define anything, whatever you want. Cluster label, again, like your choice. In a similar way, if you do not wish to edit the server.conf directly, you can use the Splunk CLI option to configure the manager node. So once the manager node is configured, you need to configure the peer nodes for both sites. So if you're defining site 1, this node will populate under site 1. If you're defining under site 2, the node will populate under site 2. Then you can configure the search head node in a similar way. So that's the quick overview about the multi-site indexer clustering. I hope it would have given you an idea at least how the multi-site indexer clustering differs from the single-site indexer clustering. What's the real use of it? Like in what cases you should think of implementing multi-site clustering, and then how to implement it. So I think that's it for this session. So in next video we'll see like how to implement the multi-site clustering. Thanks for watching, and just a humble request to each one of you. If you are coming for the first time, I really welcome you, and if you are the returning user and haven't subscribed my channel yet, to each one of you I'm requesting again to subscribe the channel to support me, motivate me, so that I can continue this journey. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.